Welcome to Canada's podcast.
Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi, Managing Editor of Canada's Podcast. Today's guest on Calgary's podcast is Frank Lonardelli, CEO of Arlington Street Investments. Thanks, Frank, for joining us today.
You're welcome. Nice to see you again.
You bet. So tell us, Frank, just a little bit about Arlington Street and what you guys do.
Well, Arlington Street is a street on Winnipeg where I grew up. So that's why we determined to name the company after that and all the lessons learned from that early childhood experience. Arlington Street as an operating company is fundamentally focused on urban or super urban mixed-use multifamily development in Calgary, currently in Kelowna, and we have 2 Eastern Canadian sites as well.
Okay. Now, one of the things that you guys do quite successfully here in Calgary is along 17th Avenue Southwest, the High Street, 17th Avenue. Very, for those of people are outside the city that don't know it, it's a very entertainment and restaurant and hospitality hub. Tell us a little bit about your strategy there and what you have been doing along 17th.
Well, I could imagine anyone doesn't know where 17th Avenue is if they live in Calgary, but if they do, we got to do a better job marketing. So 17th Avenue is interesting because of what you said, Mario. And you know, the nomenclature or the urbanized terminology we use today is not high streets, it's cool streets. And it's that big shift between what happened in the rotation of the 70s and 80s with all the wealth that was created from the baby boomers, and everybody wanted to be seen in Hugo Boss and Fendi and Valentino and all that kind of good stuff. Yep. So these high streets were created. Today, we're creating cool streets. And cool streets refers to places where the young up-and-coming professionals can live, work, play, and shop within a small radius and also be able to get to work. So if you consider the location of 17th Avenue and the vibrancy, the location is some 4 to 5 blocks over the 38 million square feet of office towers that most people work in still, if you believe in the office market, which I do. It's changed quite a bit, but that's happening. And secondly is we have 140 to 150 service providers or opportunities for people to live, work, and play. And so these are the nodes that we build into as it relates specifically to 17th Avenue. When we looked at 17th Avenue, we didn't do what we've done historically, which is to buy a set of buildings and say, well, we'll convert them into a different built form with different applications. We looked at 17th Avenue and said, let's not look at building a building. Let's look at transforming a corridor. And it's never been done on 17th Avenue because of 3 very simple reasons. Number one, the average building has been owned by the same person or family or entity for 55 to 60 years. Number two, there's no consolidated parcels to be bought and then built. And then number 3, no broker in his right mind would ever spend as much time and energy as we did to go and do exactly what we did. So what we did was we went off market and we bought 40 separate buildings and created 8 different development sites. And so now we're on project number 4 in terms of the buildings that we're currently recreating.
Tell me a little bit about the market in general here in Calgary, Frank, and what you're seeing these days. And obviously, primarily, your initiatives deal with, the residential side, and then obviously street level, the retail / hospitality side. What are those markets showing you these days?
I think we have a tale of 2 worlds, really. And the foundation of both those worlds is that we're now in a high interest rate economy, which Mario, and I don't want to date you because we both got gray hair, but people are a little bit more than we did 3 years ago. But what people forget is that over the span of time, let's call it 50 years, 8% interest is the mean interest rate that people were used to paying over that period of time. It's only been in the last decade to decade and a half where we had this Japanese style low interest rate economy where people thought they'd always have to pay interest or always have the ability of being afforded to have a 1 or 2% interest rate.
Mm.
And so now we've got an interest rate that's climbed 5 times in 12 months, and the cost of capital is some 300% more today than it was in 12 months ago. And that's going to affect everybody in very unique ways. So in what we do for a living, it's actually perpetuated the business. The positive is that renters, and we're undersupplied in the Calgary marketplace specifically, same as Kelowna, we're dramatically undersupplied. We have been for a long time. Why? Because we live in an affluent city where people were making lots of money in the oil and gas business and no one rented. They wanted to buy their first condo, just like I did when I was 30 years old. And so now we're going to more of a European style economy or culture or way of looking at this kind of living arrangement where renters will be larger in span and they'll rent for longer periods of time because the first time mortgage tests and the fact that people are actually going to have to spend 4.5% to 5% of their cost of capital. Yeah. And that's really shifted the marketplace for residential rentals. So we're undersupplied. Interest rates have created that renter to be a longer term renter, and there'll be more renters. In terms of the other asset classes, and God bless these guys going after these office conversions to residential, and I know who they are, and they're very different people. You have institutionally funded companies that I would consider they're getting these conversions done because they're in the lose less business, not make more money business. Mm. And then you've got small entrepreneurs like us who are small private companies that are very entrepreneurial, trying to do these very creative projects. And I wish them all the luck. We're pretty brave over here. We're just not that brave. But it's just because I think there's just so many challenges with that kind of whole equation. And the last part is, and sorry, long answer to your short question. I think that we have a sea change in the Alberta marketplace. I think there's lots of cracks across Canada, but we have a sea change in the Alberta marketplace in this way. I think that we're finally figured out that we can't tie ourselves to energy in the way that we have in the past. Yeah. And I am long on hydrocarbons. I'm a big oil and gas supporter. I do everything to support that end of the business. But the beautiful thing that we've done in our economy is we've really perpetuated the technology space, alternatives, and we've really worked towards diversifying our economy. And I think now that Calgary has the top 3 things that everyone's migrating towards, which is affordability. Who would have thought that would have been, the claim to fame for our city? Yeah. We have the cool factor. It's an awesome city with awesome amenities and great lifestyle opportunities, and it's safe. And if you live in Toronto and you live in Vancouver, all those young up and coming 30-year-olds who are graduating from all these great business schools, they don't get any 3 of those in those 2 areas. And I think Calgary is well suited for the future because of that reason.
All right. So Frank, growing up in the PEG, I imagine real estate was probably not your first career choice, right? You probably thought of something else to do when I grow up. How did you get involved in real estate and why?
Well, we're, speaking to the choir here, I'm Italian. So if you're Italian, you have an affinity for bricks and mortar. So yes, it was always real estate. And I always knew I was going to be involved in real estate. But my first business was actually a food company. And it was a food company because when I dropped out of school, I really didn't have any formal experience except for I grew up in an Italian restaurant. And I think I always had an entrepreneurial kind of, thread that went through me. And so I didn't have any capital and I had an idea and I thought I could take, home cooking into large institutional facilities and turnkey those facilities with this kind of mandate to provide people non-institutional based food products and food options and optionality. So that food company was a cafeteria company, then a catering company, then a vending company, then a coffee company, then a coffee roasting company, and then a garbage company. And it was called the First Avenue Group that I started when I was 26 years old in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And the real estate piece really was from the year that I started the business, it was a cash flowing business. I took my money in free flowing cash and I started investing into real estate. And I didn't have a strategy. My strategy was more spray and pray. But it led me to making some really lucky decisions. and it informed me on the things that I really wanted to do in the future. And so 10 years ago, and that company's been around for 20 years, but 10 years ago, I just thought I need to get really serious about monetizing all of the learnings that I had in real estate from all these different things I did across Canada and the US, and really formalize Arlington Street and really go after this very focused approach.
Interesting. What do you like about it, about being in real estate, especially now?
Well, I think it's probably because I'm partially insane. I think it's one of the hardest businesses in the world to be successful at. I really think the dynamics in real estate, second only to the restaurant business. And I grew up in the restaurant because, I tell people this all the time. I said, when you go to a restaurant, you're there for 2 hours. The person who owns the restaurant has 26 different opportunities to screw up your experience.
Mm-hmm.
They also have 26 different opportunities to provide you an experience that you'll always remember, that, which is why people keep coming back to the restaurants they love. And, the people who figure that out are the Earls of the worlds and the Joeys of the worlds. Like, they figured out, how do I monetize through a system approach?
Yeah.
The experience that people coming back, much like McDonald's, except in a very different class of food. And so I think the dynamics of everything, buying the asset, ideating the end result, designing the building, building the building, financing the building, and then trying to create a brand, it's so hard. Like, it's really, really difficult, which is why, and all the guys that I know in real estate, and regardless of what your opinions are of them, I have an infinite amount of respect in everybody who's doing what we're doing, because it's really, really dynamic. And because of it, it's very difficult.
You know what? You guys in Arlington, as you said, you operate in different areas, including Kelowna. But what is it about Calgary? What do you like about Calgary and doing business here?
Well, when I moved to Calgary in 2000, I told the mayor I was leaving, and I told the mayor where I was coming, and I had the great pleasure of meeting the mayor when I moved here. And I told our mayor, I said, the reason I'm leaving Winnipeg, and we'd won some small business awards, and we were a very small company, is I said, Winnipeg always feels like someone has to win and someone has to lose. That feels like the business environment. And then when I moved to Calgary in 2000, we were at the precipice of a new energy cycle. And I met all these 30-year-old guys who had mud companies and exploration businesses and were geologists in these large, companies that were created by Albertans. And it was just entrepreneurial. And we were open for business. And Ralph Klein was here. And, he was a cool guy that you can have a beer with and talk about business. And he didn't really care what your last name was. Yeah. And I found that with our partners too, because real estate is super capital intensive. We needed partners. And, people would sit in the pocket who made money, and they said, hey, I can see myself in this guy. I was 30. I was 29 when I moved here. I could see myself in this guy. And this guy, even if the world goes to crap, he's going to hold on and he's going to make something work. And we developed these relationships. And so I love that about the city then. And I love that about the city now. I will say the pre-5-year down cycle to the pandemic was deadly for the spirit of Calgary, of Alberta, really. I think we lost our way entrepreneurially. I think people started giving up. We had a lot of guys that are partners of ours who turned 60 and 70 and said, look, I'm going to move all my money into the US because it's got a better, tax regime. I don't think we're going to have a new cycle, and I don't think we're going to get out of it. And so we're in this rut, this really long rut. And I think people just lost faith, and we didn't. We thought from a Winnipeg perspective, wow, if I love the city and I love the real estate at the height of the market, why would I want to buy a bunch of real estate on sale? Because I'm going to be here for another 20 years. And that's the approach we took.
What do you think it takes to be a successful entrepreneur?
I think at the very foundation, a positive mental attitude. You can be really smart. You can be really technically savvy. You can be clever. But if you don't have a positive mental attitude, you're going to get killed. And I always guise it in this way. A lot of people think that success is like what I refer to as a shooting star. It's not. There's three types of continuums in that equation. There's shooting stars, shining stars, and space junk, right? And shining stars are people who are successful over the span of time, not in the moment, right? So in the moment, if you looked at a slice of my life over 20 years at any given time, I could look really, really bad. And by the way, there are some guys who are way more successful than I am, and I'm relatively successful, who have multi-billion-dollar platforms, and you know their names because some of them may own hockey teams. But if you look at the smartest guy in energy, and you picked just what he looked like in a very short period of time, maybe 2 quarters in 2020, you'd go, the guy's a bum. Like his company's like 1/50th of what it was worth, and you're like, and people think about things like that, and they're like, and people love to make comments about people when they're down. But it's success is about a positive mental attitude, acting to the marketplace, being very cognizant of what's happening in the next 5 to 10 years, and being very thoughtful about maintaining a positive attitude, regardless of when the market goes away. Because when the market goes away, all the enemies show up, all the attackers show up, all the negativity shows up. And then if you start feeding into that, you're dead in the water.
Mm-hmm. What's the biggest lesson you've learned as a businessman?
Hey, Mario, I'll put it to you a different way. And I know you're asking the questions, but I'll have some fun with you, okay? I would imagine like you're one of the most respected and likable guys in your space. And by the way, nobody who doesn't like Mario Tanaguzzi?
Oh my gosh.
But I bet there are some colleagues, because you guys had this crazy thing that happened in the journalism space. Yeah. There are a couple of guys looking at Mario going, oh, like Mario's got his podcast. He's got a whole new career. He's kicking butt. There's probably a couple of people who feel envious of you, right? Because you found a new career and you did it in a very difficult circumstances, And so that's beautiful. That's a beautiful story. That's a classic entrepreneurial story, and you've done amazing. So sorry, I wanted to say that and I forgot what your question was.
Thank you for that. Now you got me blushing, but okay, thanks a lot. Okay, so back to me leading this. What is the biggest lesson you think you've learned over the 20 years or so of being in business?
So many, but the thing that comes to mind, and I know because I'm very comfortable in difficult times. And I'm very comfortable telling people the truth, even if the truth doesn't sound good. What I mean by that is that when you're in business and the tide goes against you, all your forecasts and all the things you thought you were going to do and accomplish, you can't do. And if I have a partner, I'm very comfortable telling them that. So this idea that truth has endurance and lies have speed. And a lot of entrepreneurs, when they get into the mud, the blood and the flood, they think that the response is they should lie to their partners, or they should lie to their staff, or they should make up a story. I love the brutal truth. When we hit the pandemic and we went negative oil, and I've said this in public before, I looked at everybody and I said, I think our portfolio in this moment is not only worth zero, it could be worth minus $25 million. Now, you got to take people to the next place if you say something, because that'll scare the crap out of someone, right? But it was the truth. And if you don't deal with the brutal fact when it's sitting right in front of you, then you make up stories and you don't act, not react, but you don't act to the circumstance. And if you don't act quickly and decisively, you're going to get killed long term.
Yeah. So, Frank, anybody that's an entrepreneur and business person, owner, you're working basically 24/7, right? If you're not actually working, you're thinking about the business all the time. I'm just curious, what do you do outside of business to keep your mind and healthy, I guess, so that it's not 99.9% thinking business all the time.
Well, I told one of my best friends at dinner at Milpa, little plug for our new Mexican restaurant next door on 17th and 5th, best Mexican restaurant in the city. I said to him, my best friend in the world, and I said, I lead an exceptionally boring life. Like I've become exceptionally boring in terms of my life. But your question is such an important question, because the projects in the company fight for my time against my kids. And really, it's the only two priorities I have, like the business and the kids. And I have kids in the business too, because a lot of my 50 and 60-year-old guys sometimes act like kids too, right? And you got to take care of them, you got to nurture them, you got to support them, you got to help them through challenging times.
Yeah.
I struggle. The honest answer is I haven't done a good job creating environments for myself where my mind can be at peace, where I could be quiet, and I'm involved in nurturing activities for my soul and my mind body. I haven't done a good job at that, and it's something that I'm working on regularly. I think the good news is I'm the kind of person who can get a lot in a very short period of time. So if I get a chance on a business trip, I know this is going to sound, you're going to tell you're whoever's watching this is going to say, now I completely understand how dysfunctional this guy is. I actually look forward to going to Toronto to work, because I know when I'm all done that I get to fly back in a really nice seat in a big plane, and I get to watch a movie, and I'm quiet, and no one can talk to me.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And
there.
Believe it or not, that those are some of the ways in which I create that equilibrium.
Excellent. I guess before closing off here, Frank, just let's go back to Arlington for a second. What are the plans for the company in the future? Like just continuing on what you're doing, or anything else that you might have, looking forward to?
Yeah, well, this company is led by a growth entrepreneur today. In the future, it may be different. So I'm having fun when I'm growing, and if I'm not growing, I'm not having fun. So we intend to grow. That's our number one mandate. Grow always in all markets. And so we are, as you're aware, we're going to start construction on our Enzo project, which is on the site of the old Bongiornos. Will be the old Bongiornos when we tell it. That'll be May of this year. So that's right around the corner. We'll be going in the first quarter of next year to build our Fish Bins project, which will be the largest multifamily project in the urban beltline on 17th Avenue. Our portfolio in Kelowna is about 2.5 times larger. So we have two projects going into the ground at the same time this year. So we'll be growing. So it's growth. We're also we have two very large mandates that are kind of outside of that. And one is the consolidation of all of our multifamily into a different entity and a different brand, which when I get there and I've got my head all around it and I got the right people in place, I'll give you a heads up and tell you what it's about, because I think it's very exciting, because it hasn't been done before. And then quite frankly, my intention is to plan out what my life looks like after I'm 60, which is about 9 odd years down the road, which is what I really want to do in life, and it won't have anything to do with business.
I'm trying to plan out my life when I'm 90, so it'll be a lot of lunches down at Buongiorno with a shot of grappa. So that'll be my 90.
Yeah, well, hey, it's a moving target, right? If you're not waking up every day asking how you have to amend your assumptions, you're probably not very thoughtful in the future, right?
Yeah, you bet. All right, Frank, pleasure speaking with you again. Thanks very much for joining us.
Mario, thanks for the time. Great to see you again.
All right, super. That was Frank Lonardelli, who is CEO of Arlington Street Investments. I'm Mario Tonaguzzi, Managing Editor of Canada's Podcast. This has been Calgary's Podcast. Thanks for joining us today.